Bridging divides in America. Is it too late? That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chelmer, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Look at this headline. Don't look. Listen to this headline from the Wall Street Journal. A look back at how awful politics was in 2023. And then the subheadline, the question is whether the troubles were the cause or the result of a divided electorate. Well, I can answer that one, right? Politics follows culture. So the divide was there, creating the divisive political atmosphere. Just my thought. And before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, at Real Life Network, and guess what? Wherever podcasts are offered. But let me go back to washingtontimes.com really quickly. If you go to washingtontimes.com, scroll to the bottom of the page, find the newsletter section, click on it. Please sign up for my 3 times a week newsletter. It's called Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley, and you will get Monday, Wednesday, and Friday delivered right to your email box. My commentaries that I write at the Washington Times, filled with bullet points and talking points and that big old F word that the Democrats hate to hear, called facts, right? Filled with all that so you can fight the far leftists that are rapidly crumbling America. So you can talk back to that socialist uncle that you just have to have at the dinner table at Christmas time, right? Because if you don't invite him, then your favorite aunt is going to get upset, and so you got to invite him, but he just is one of those people that thinks he's always right, and he's angry, and he's leftist, he's socialist, and he carries around his copy of Karl Marx, and he tries to shove it on your kids when you're not looking. So if you want to talk back to him with effect, right? Be able to persuade and convince him how wrong he is, sign up for my newsletter. That's all I'm saying. But you can also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are offered. There's an interesting poll that came out from Pew Research in September 19th, 2023. It is called America's Dismal View of the Nation's Politics. And one of the takeaways is 65% say they always or often feel exhausted when thinking about politics. You know, that's kind of common, right? But nobody's forcing you to think about politics. So if you're exhausted, think about something else. You do have control, right? You can read the Bible, right? Oh, I don't know. You can read another book, you can go on a walk, you can talk with, not that uncle at your Christmas table, but you can talk with sane people. You can join some groups, join a Bible study group, join a gym, do something else to take your mind off politics. You don't have to be exhausted about it. But that being said, it is everywhere, right? Politics is just people. It's not voting. Too many people think, well, what does politics have to do with me? What difference does it make what takes place in Congress? How does that affect me? Or even worse, what difference does it make what the World Economic Forum does or the United Nations? That's politics. That doesn't impact me. Well, guess what? It does in a very, very, very big way. Getting even bigger under Joe Biden, who is the globalist in charge, who just plays the puppet so the globalists at the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, so forth and so on, can steamroll their anti-American agenda through America, which is where we're at right now. So when you look at the divided atmosphere in America, when you look at the fiery, hot political climate, you have to see it's because of the divide in the culture. It's because people are looking at the world in a different way. You've got people in America whose worldview is Christian, biblical, godly, followed by an idea of constitutional limited government, which is usually represented by the Republican Party, or at least by conservative principles. And then you've got the other side, the lunatics, right? The voters in the Democrat Party, the members of the Democrat Party who have gone so far off base that I don't even think they're in this stratosphere. They think that, you know, for instance, having sex in a Senate office on video, 2 men having sex, let's be more specific, in a Senate office on video is none of your business, folks. You know, that's private. Private. We don't need to talk about that. That's private. Or they think that the LGBTQ community is filled with normal people, and that, yeah, it's quite sane, it's quite logical to think that just because you're born a boy, that you have to stay a boy, right? That you can't be a girl or a they or a it or a dolphin if you want at whim. That's the Democrat Party nowadays. And so when you're looking at the divisiveness in America, it's worldviews. It's not just a matter of voting for this politician versus that politician. It's about people's moral compasses, right? Like I said, you've got half of America that follows godly Judeo-Christian principles, believes in the Constitution, believes in the rule of law, believes that government is there to serve and protect, not rule and dictate. And then you've got the other half of America, epitomized by the Democrat Party, who think that it's incumbent on government, it's the rightful role of government to provide from cradle to grave. And by providing, I mean redistributing from those who have to those who have not. And more than those who have not, those who outright refuse and will not, those who refuse to work, those who think, I'm born, I'm here, so now you provide for me. So it's very difficult to bridge these divides. And as Pew Research found, majorities say, I'm reading now, the political process is dominated by special interests, flooded with campaign cash, and mired in partisan warfare. Elected officials are widely viewed as self-serving and ineffective. Well, that's because they're controlled by larger forces. They're not controlled, as they should be rightly, by the people in America, the voters, to be more specific. Not the crybabies who sit there and rail at the TV and complain, but then don't vote because, oh, what difference does my vote make? Or I'm too busy to vote. Or how about this one? Christians, I live in this world, but not of this world. So because of that, I will not vote. Well, when you don't vote, you don't get to have a vote on how the politicians are serving, right? You're not doing any good. You're not doing any favor for America for whatever your reason, sitting out the vote. But elected officials are widely viewed as self-serving and ineffective. That's because they are self-serving and ineffective. They're not serving the interests of their voters any longer. The voters of America who elect them to do the jobs and then who, let's remember, pay their salaries, right? So in this poll, let me read a little bit more. Notably, Americans' unhappiness with politics comes at a time of historically high levels of voter turnout in national elections. The elections of 2018, 2020, and 2022 were three of the highest turnout U.S. elections in their respective types in decades. Hey, kudos to us, right? Kudos to us for voting. But voting in elections is very different from being satisfied with the state of politics. Pew writes, and the public is deeply dissatisfied. You know, I've been watching these types of polls for years, right? Decades now. And in the polls that are geared at capturing the spirit of America, the tone, the satisfaction levels of America, the common denominator through all these years of studies and polling has always shown this. The American people are always dissatisfied. By a bunch, by a batch, we're always dissatisfied. In this particular poll, just 4% of U.S. adults say the political system is working extremely or very well. Another 23% say it is working somewhat well, and about 6 in 10, or 63%, express not too much or no confidence at all in the future of the U.S. political system. That's sort of a broad terminology right there, the U.S. political system. So when you're expressing no confidence in that, what does that mean? That you think the Constitution should go? I don't know exactly what they mean by that, but the 4% of U.S. adults who say the political system is working extremely or very well, Honestly, that seems high. That seems a little bit high to me. Another finding, another takeaway. Positive views of many governmental and political institutions are at historic lows. Like I said, on polls of these types that look to gauge the feeling, the satisfaction levels of the American public throughout history, at least in the last couple of decades, always show that we're dissatisfied. So the only differences in these polls is the level of dissatisfaction. And I find it interesting that here we are under Joe Biden. And once again, we're reaching historic levels, right? Look at all the history that Joe Biden is making. Open borders, allowing in millions of illegals, historical levels. Low economy, joblessness, people losing real income, and so forth, historical levels. Americans giving up top military grade equipment and screwing over their allies and leaving behind soldiers and families and allowing fine patriotic members of our military to be killed during Afghanistan withdrawal. Historic levels. Joe Biden is historically successful at failing. Just keep that in mind as we read this. Positive views of many governmental and political institutions are at historic lows. History in the making. Just 16% of the public say, Pew writes, they trust the federal government always or most of the time. Look, that 16% honestly should be 0%. If you're one of those people out there who think the federal government is always or most of the time worthy of your trust, you're missing what it means to be an American, because in the DNA of America is distrust of government, right? It's built into our system. Accountability, transparency, checks and balances, a questioning attitude, all based on the core concept of American exceptionalism, which is individualism. Individual rights coming from a creator. Individualism. So with that individualism comes, by logical extension, the need to question a government narrative, a state narrative, a collective narrative, right? Because that's what government is. It's a collective, it's a state, it's a body. And an individual is in constant tension with a collective. It's just natural. So with American individualism, which is to say exceptionalism, must come an automatic skepticism of the government. So 16%, too high. That should be 0%. Well, trust has hovered near historic lows, Pew writes, for the better part of the last 20 years. Hey, isn't that what I was just saying? You watch these polls for years, for decades, and it's always pessimistic on the part of Americans. It's always distrust. It's always dissatisfaction. Today, it stands among the lowest levels dating back nearly 7 decades. And more Americans have an unfavorable than favorable opinion of the Supreme Court. The first time that has occurred in polling going back to the late 1980s. And that, my friend, is due entirely to Democrats drumming up accusations and allegations and fabrications and so forth against the conservative appointed Supreme Court justices. You know, the staff of Sonia Sotomayor can run off and pitch her book for sale at libraries and bookstores and break ethical, moral compass codes on that. But it's Justice Thomas that's under the gun. It's Justice Alito that faces the fire. This is how Democrats work. Hypocrisy. That's entirely a different show. That's entirely a different series of shows. So on this one, we're talking about a divided nation. And as the Wall Street Journal says, a look back at how awful politics was in 2023. Asked to summarize the year 2023 in politics, Republican pollster wuld Ayers is blunt. 2023 was a terrible year for America's political system. That was the quote. Agree or disagree? Well, of course you have to agree with it. The question, though, going forward is there anything that can be done about the political divide in America. And I have a guest with me today who says, yes. Yes, indeed. His name is Sam Daley-Harris, and he is here on Bold and Blunt to discuss. Sam, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It is so great to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Your book, it comes out in January, Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. And I know I stumbled on that word, transformational, but you can clarify. What do you mean by that? What is transformational advocacy?
Well, let me make the distinction. Most people know transactional advocacy. Sign the petition, transaction complete, done. Transformational advocacy is where volunteers are trained, encouraged, and then succeed at doing things as advocates that they never thought they could do. And as a result, they see themselves in a new light. They see themselves as community leaders. And just an example, I can't meet with my member. Oh, I can? I did. Oh, I can do. I couldn't write a letter to, I can write a letter to the editor. It was published. So there's things you think you couldn't do, but you get trained and encouraged. And when you succeed, you see yourself in a new light, and that's transformational advocacy.
So my sort of one-line takeaway from the press materials that I've received for your book is that it's about bridging divides, which is certainly at this time in American history something that we need. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. It's really important to reach across the aisle and find common ground. And let me give you one example. The group that I founded in 1980 called Results, it's an anti-poverty lobby, has lobbied for nearly 40 years, starting in 1984, on child survival issues, where 40 years ago, the UN Children's Fund, UNICEF, was reporting that 40,000 children around the world were dying each day from preventable things, dehydration brought on by diarrhea coupled with malnutrition. Well, the volunteers have lobbied each year, reached across the aisle, and the most recent numbers from the UN Children's Fund is there's been a 66% decline in child deaths globally from 40,000 a day in the early 80s to 13,800 a day in 2021. That didn't happen just miraculously. People educated themselves, they rolled up their sleeves, they met with members of Congress, and they made a difference with it. And so, yeah, it's about what do you have to do to make a difference? And if that includes working together, then let's find a way to do that.
I think that message it resonates with most people, right? Most people gravitate toward the idea of Republicans and Democrats speaking in politics, right? Not so much just in culture, but in Congress working together to achieve a common goal that is for the greater good and not in a socialist way, in a way that still recognizes America's roots and so forth.
Yep.
But if you look at what's taking place now, there are really very few issues that, pragmatically speaking, I see as potential for a meeting of minds. Am I wrong on that? How?
Well, let me give you an example. I think that there's this movement that it will succeed or won't on the child tax credit for only those who are very low income. I mean, I remember when I was starting out in advocacy and my salary was really low and I was working hard, that kind of thing, where $300 a month extra to help pay for diapers or whatever would have made a big difference. I think there is behind the scenes a movement happening right now whereby not the child tax credit for everyone, but for those who are struggling and whose kids, just can use a little extra help in terms of food on the table and some basic things like that. I think that's an example where there is some common ground and that we may see some fruition in the next couple of months on that or not. I mean, that's the way it goes. But I think there are a number of issues. I mean, I could give you another one. The Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria has saved 50 million lives since it started, along with its partners, in 2002. There's no need for people to be dying of AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria when there are solutions to those problems. And I think people on both sides of the aisle see that. I mean, not 100%, but they see that.
So I imagine that among your skill set would be things like the art of persuasion, right? How to successfully bridge gaps using just persuasion and diplomacy. So how do you meet minds on Capitol Hill on something like the Israel war right now?
Right. Well, let me give you a more generic answer, which is if I'm working with my member of Congress and they oppose my bill or they oppose this position, rather than persuasion, I get really good at listening. And the three questions that I ask volunteers to ask, one is, we know you don't support this. We know you don't support this bill, whatever it is. What would it take to change your mind? Question two, could you say more about that? Question three, why do you think that is? And essentially, you're looking for assignments. In other words, if you're my member of Congress and I say, well, I know you don't support this bill, what would it take to change your mind? And you say, well, if you could get the Chamber of Commerce on board or whatever, there's my assignment. Go talk to the Chamber of Commerce. Go see what it is that would that they're asking for that could make that change. So in some sense, it's a little less persuasion and a little more listening, and that really makes the difference.
That really is the art of conversation right there anyhow, listening, right? And being an active listener. And I think those three questions are excellent because it's something that you can take outside of the political world and use just in your business world or even in family relationships, yes?
Exactly, yeah, absolutely. I was wondering if I could tell a brief story of how I got involved in this work, which I think is really useful for listeners. I talk about it in the book about knowing your why and sharing it. And so this is a shortened version. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in music, and I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic for 12 years and taught high school music. And 43 years ago, I founded the Anti-Poverty Lobby Results. And a lot of times I'm asked, what's the connection? Music, poverty, what's the connection there? And when I look back in my life, there's certain experiences that start pointing me in a different direction. The day before college graduation, a friend, a fraternity brother a year younger, died in a tractor-trailer accident in Georgia. 4 years later, around college graduation in '68, U.S. Senator Robert Kennedy was assassinated, and these deaths got me to asking the questions of purpose. Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? No answer, but the question's there. 9 years later, I'm invited to a presentation on ending world hunger, and I go to this thing thinking, well, hunger is inevitable. What do I know? I'm a musician. I mean, I'm thinking it's inevitable because in my mind, there are no solutions, because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. But I go to this thing, it's obvious right away. There's no mystery to growing food, clean water, basic health, literacy. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature. People will just never get around to doing what can be done, but there's one human nature I've some control over, my own, and my question, why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. Sorry, this is the end of the story. In 1978 and 1979, I spoke to 7,000 high school students on ending world hunger, classroom by classroom. And before I went into the first classroom, I asked them I read some quotes, from a National Academy of Sciences study calling for the political will to end hunger. So I asked 7,000 students, what's the name of your member of Congress? I don't want to know if you met him. I don't want to know if you wrote, just the name. Out of 7,000 asked, the number I don't want to even ask you to guess. The number who could answer correctly was 200, fewer than 3%. 6,800, over 97%, could not tell me the name of their member of Congress. And results grew out of this gap between the calls for the political will to end hunger on the one hand and the lack of basic information on who represented us in Washington on the other. And a few months ago, there was a column in the Boston Globe that said, the title was, "You can name the Three Stooges. Can you name your three representatives in Congress?"
Wow.
And it was, it was a real example of that need to educate Americans. Now, we didn't start working with high school students, but to educate Americans on the basics of who represents you, and how do you write a letter, and how do you write a letter to the editor, and what's an agenda for a meeting, and, all the basics, so we can come off the sidelines and make a difference, really.
So I'm listening to your story, and what's going through my mind is that you strike as somebody, beginning with the questions that you started asking yourself about why are you here and so forth, that you strike me as somebody who listened to the promptings of the Holy Spirit and followed that path. And you also strike me as somebody who is an excellent example of just wherever you are in life, looking for ways to help others and then actually taking steps to do that. Can you respond? I don't know your faith or anything, but
right.
You know this is a Christian conservative.
I think it's kind of interesting. I grew up in a very observant Jewish household where my father went to synagogue twice a day for the last 20 years of his life. And for about 50 years, I called myself a Tikkun Olam Jew, which is Tikkun Olam is healing the world Jew. And I went to high holidays and Passover Seders, but not much more. My mom passed away in June of 2019, 18 days before her 101st birthday. And I started going back 3 mornings a week to say Mourner's Kaddish, which is an 11-month period that got you, in my case, into COVID. I never stopped. I go 3 mornings a week for the last, I don't know what that is, 4 years. Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday are my synagogue. They call it minyan, where they look for 10 men or women to be the minimum to attend. So, something that's really had a profound impact on me is Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you? Only to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. So it's you could say, in a way, it's even come back in my life since my mom's passing.
Well, just listening to you these last few minutes, very inspiring, very inspirational story. And I just wonder, if we only have a couple minutes left, if you could sort of wrap up with, I don't know, some bullet points maybe for people listening who really want to take that first step and put into play some of your advisements.
Right. Well, I mean, if you went to civiccourage.org, you could let me know what kind of group that you would like to be connected to. So that's one thing people could do. ReclaimingOurDemocracy.com would be where you could link to the book and how to order it. And I think there are a lot of how-tos in there. If I could just say one other thing, I talk to people in the book about 3 things to look for in an organization that's delivering transformational advocacy. Number 1, enrollment and community building. They bring new people in, they form them into chapters so they're not working alone, and they have a monthly all-of-organization webinar to build community, inspiring, hopefully. Number 2, training, that the organization trains you in how to be more effective. Number 3, moving out of your comfort zone. There's this great drawing in the book, there's a small circle in one corner called your comfort zone, and next to it is a much larger circle that's labeled where the magic happens. And, you know, you really want to find an organization that doesn't push you out, but encourages you. No, you can do this. You can write that letter to the editor. We'll look at it if you want before you send it, but you can do this, and encourages you out of your... So it's number one, enrollment and community building. Number two, training for effectiveness. And number three, encouraging you out of your comfort zone or to make a big difference.
I think the encouragement of moving out of your comfort zone is huge. I think that would generate quite a bit of action if more people took just that advice.
Yes.
Sam Daley-Harris, Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. I know it's on Amazon, but give your website one more time, please.
Well, reclaimingourdemocracy.com will get you to Amazon, Borders, and others.
Excellent. Very easy. Thank you so much, Sam, for your story. Thank you for coming on Bold and Blunt.
Thank you so much.
Bridging divides. What a great idea for politically divided, culturally divided America right now. Thank you for listening. I want to remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, where you may also subscribe to my 3 times a week newsletter. You can get Bold and Blunt also at Real Life Network, and guess what? Wherever podcasts are offered. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.